Hello and welcome once again to GBMC Facebook Live. I'm Don Scott, and with me today is Chaplain Joe Hart from GBMC. Now, we talked about this when we were promoting this visit or whatever, that the actual title of your office is Spiritual Support Center. Services, I'm sorry.
I like alliteration, the three S's.
Yep, and you like threes, I know that. But one would look at that and say, you know, what the heck is spiritual support?
Right.
And isn't it the same thing as religion kind of disguised?
Not actually. The reality is that life and people and our community, life is so unpredictable. And spiritual support is that bridge or that place where the gap is to fill in for people's lives when they come to the hospital, whether it be for something scheduled or an emergency or in the midst of crisis. We are there to spiritually, emotionally, and to give comfort to our patients and families, however they define it. I, as a chaplain, do not come with an agenda. I'm a generalist. I come to say, I'm here to support you by your needs, by your definition, by your beliefs, and accordingly then to try to offer that to our patients.
And how big is spiritual support services at GBMC? How many people?
Well, we have myself and my staff chaplain, Sandy Rector, and my assistant, Kitty Allen, and then I have about 85 volunteers who are with us through the week during the day, and then I have 30 additional volunteer chaplains at night.
Okay, now, I'd like to know more clearly, I guess, understand more clearly exactly what you and your staff do. You said comfort and support, but...
So we visit.
Okay.
We do, my volunteers many times do spiritual assessment visits, but then we also, under our umbrella, we do prayer shawl ministry. We have pet therapy. I have 7 dogs who visit the hospital on a regular basis.
I've seen the dogs. I didn't realize they were part of
Yes.
spiritual support services.
Absolutely.
Makes sense.
Yeah. And then we have music ministry. Like today, we have the Alma Donovan Memorial Concert Series called Wednesdays at Noon. We featured the Peabody Jazz Trio. So we bring music to patients. We have 2 grand pianos in the hospital, and I have about 10 different pianists who come during the week at different times to volunteer to utilize their musical talents for our patients, whether they're sitting in the lobby, if they're on their way to radiation oncology, if they're anticipating surgery, or perhaps waiting for a new grandchild.
And of course, GBMC is a birthing center for more babies than any other hospital
Absolutely.
in the Baltimore area.
We're very proud of that.
Yeah. You mentioned prayer shawl ministries.
Right.
You know, what's that mean to somebody who doesn't know?
So
Me.
I have a coordinator, and she talks to different congregations, senior groups, high schools. Kids are doing projects that make prayer shawls. And what it means is that while prayer shawls, which are like throws, if you will, you know, if you're sitting in your chair and you just want some comfort or whatever, a fleece covering always feels so good. Hospitals are cold because it keeps the infection down, but our patients sometimes get chilled. And so we have folks who are there to present those to our patients, and different groups make them. And what makes it a prayer shawl is while they're being made, the patients are prayed for. And so we present a little card with every prayer shawl saying that this has been made for you as an individual, and while it was made, you were prayed for.
Not saying put this on and pray.
No. Okay. It's just a covering whatever their beliefs are, that they are not alone in their journey with illness.
And I know your other volunteers, I see them come in and go, they go to visit patients. Is that patients who ask for it, or do you approach every patient that's...
We try to approach as many patients as possible proactively, because we are a part of the care team for the hospital, much like the doctor, the nurse, the dietitian, the physical therapist. Spiritual support is a part of that extended team.
Having been involved in the church all my life myself and involved in outreach at times, I know that often even people who are members of a church who believe in God in some way, distant form or whatever, don't like to have it pushed in their face.
Right. So we're not there to push anything. We don't, as I mentioned, we don't have an agenda. If a patient says to us, please sit down, I'd like to discuss X, Y, or Z, we are there to help them with those kinds of questions. Conversely, if a patient says, "Thank you for stopping by, I don't really want to talk," we respect that and tell them to have a good day and hope they get better and move on.
Is there a back door or a side door that you use to approach those people?
Many times people are like, "Well, I don't want to talk to you." "Oh, okay. Well, have a good day," or whatever. "Well, but before you leave," or sometimes it's a catch. Sometimes they think that we're representing a particular tradition, and again, we do not.
That was my next question. Do you represent all religions separately? Are you ecumenical, or are you
totally interfaith? We are totally ecumenical. Again, I want to listen to what the patient's needs are, if they belong to a church, a mosque, or a synagogue, or no particular tradition, and that we can augment their needs during their hospitalization. We're there to try to provide it for them.
Okay, let's say someone comes in and they are Muslim, and you're obviously not, and can you arrange for them to talk to one of their own?
Absolutely, and that's true of every tradition. Again, if they're Christian, Jewish, or Muslim, I can have an imam come, I can have a rabbi, I can have a priest, a minister, whatever they need. I have quite a list of community clergy who I have relationships with and value very much.
Okay, let's talk about the service dogs, because that came as a surprise to me here that was part of your ministry, if I can say that.
Right, absolutely.
What do the dogs do?
Well, there's a difference between a service dog and a therapy dog.
I'm sorry, therapy dog.
They're therapy dogs,
yes,
right?
Okay.
But we work with the National Capital Pet Therapy Organization, and basically those dogs are fully screened, they're fully trained, they have to be tested each year so that they are totally docile and that they can be with a patient and there's no fear that they would nip at someone or whatever. One of my favorite parts of it, Don, is in our intensive care area we have a little dog named Hannah. And Buddy is the handler. Mm-hmm. And Hannah is this little dog that I've fallen in love with. And we actually put Hannah in the bed with patients who are on ventilators. And we can actually watch sometimes that their heart rate actually slows down a little in a good way, that they're actually more relaxed with the dog in the bed with them.
It's kind of off the topic here, but I'm surprised at that much of close contact. Is that true? All dogs? I think most people would think the therapy dog comes in and the patient looks at it and that's it.
Well, some do. But some who have pets and are away from their pets, because the hospital bed is the farthest place from perhaps their pet, that they get to be reunited with that animal, or an animal that reminds them of their own dog.
Okay, the two grand pianos
yes.
that are constantly being played, what purpose does that serve other than background noise, I guess?
Again, it's another form of therapy. Again, studies show that when people listen to music, that they are more relaxed, they're more at ease, and they're more comforted. So it's a nonverbal way of providing comfort. It reminds me of the story of the man who his wife dropped him off. He was coming in for radiation therapy, and he walked in the main lobby past the piano, and the pianist was playing the song Moon River. Moon River was the song that he and his wife had their first dance to at their wedding in 1962. And he stood there and he waited, and his wife came in behind him and took his hand and looked at him and said, "Things are going to be okay." And with that, he went for his radiation treatment.
Wow. I have to admit, for people who don't know, I volunteer in the hospital lobby as a greeter one day a week, and when the piano is playing, oftentimes someone will walk in and they're surprised. And next thing you know, they're standing over at the edge of the piano and they're singing.
Yeah, that happens sometimes as well.
Yeah, and it's like, my gosh, you came to a hospital to be treated or to see someone, and next thing you know, you're singing in the lobby.
Exactly. And studies show that patients, family members, again, their anxiety is reduced with whatever they're facing when they hear music that comforts.
Okay. You brought up the story of the husband and wife in Moon River, but I imagine there are other memorable situations that you could tell us about?
Sure. One of my favorite stories is my story of Billy. Billy was a 7-year-old grandson of one of our patients in intensive care. And Billy's mom and dad came to me when the doctor shared with them that Billy's grandfather was not doing well at all. And so the mom said, we'd really love Billy to see his grandfather, but we're not sure to bring him into an intensive care environment if that's what would be best for him. We don't want him to be traumatized or, feel made to be uncomfortable. So they said to me, would you mind talking to our son about this possibility? So Billy and I sat down and I said, Billy, I hear you love baseball. Oh, yeah. And with that, he started talking about the Orioles. And so we talked about the Orioles for a little while, and I said, hey, Billy, by the way, I hear your grandfather's pretty sick, not doing very well. He said, yeah, my pop-pop's been sick for a long time. And I said, if you were given an opportunity, would you want to be able to tell your pop-pop how much you love him again? You bet I would. So at any rate, I then went and talked to the mom and dad, and I said, I think he could handle this. And I explained that his pop-pop would not be able to talk, but his mom and dad would be with him. And he was a brave little boy. And he said, you bet, I want to see my pop-pop. So his pop-pop heard his voice and wasn't able to speak because he was on a ventilator, but he reached out his hand. And in that encounter, Billy said, Pop-Pop, it's Billy. And a tear came to Pop-Pop's eye.
I'll bet.
And to me, that's that other part of medicine, that part of what we do in spiritual support is connect families in a spirit of love relationally in ways that are beyond words many times.
I would imagine you're also there toward the end of a lot of patients' lives.
Yeah.
And I can't say that would be memorable, but it's got to be handled a special way, I assume.
Well, there are many challenges these days. As we know, the Gallup organization tells us that the average American child lives 150 miles away from their home of origin. The average family is now 2.5 children, and people are living longer. And if you take those three pieces of data or statistics, what happens in, say, end of life, whatever, is that families many times are separated. And so what we do in spiritual support, what I do in the ministry that I'm called to do, is to try to bring families together in ways to make those final goodbyes as memorable or as connected as possible. So many times grandchildren are on the West Coast, children can't get here, whatever. So we encourage family members to call in because of the wonderful gift of cell phones, that they can then communicate and do FaceTime with their loved one, or that they can talk to their loved one if they can't be there in person. Or if they're on their way, I'll say, why don't we have you speak to the person who's coming, so if their loved one chooses to leave us before they get here, at least they'll have the experience of having said to their loved one that they love them.
You brought up cell phones, which brings to mind that I am supposed to remind people during our little narrowcast here that if you do have a question for Joe, all you have to do is go down the right-hand side of the Facebook page there and text it to us, and our producer here will text it to me on our telephone should you have a question about
Absolutely.
What we're doing. And of course, it is Joe Hart, who's the chaplain and director of the Spiritual Support Services at GBMC. We are GBMC Facebook Live right now. Yeah. And I understand another function you do at the hospital is you are part of the ethics committee?
I'm co-chair of the medical ethics committee for the hospital,
okay,
yes.
Medical ethics,
yes.
Not just overall.
Well, it can be life ethics, whatever.
I don't think as hospitals having ethics committees, Hippocrates, right. The Hippocratic Oath,
right.
Is there. What's an ethics committee do?
Well, an ethics committee is comprised of a variety of professions. We have doctors, we have nurses, we have social workers, we have community clergy, we have theologians, we have all different types of people from all different traditions. We have rabbis, we have priests, we have ministers, we have cross-cultural, we have Asian, we have African American, we have Anglo, we have all different types of folks. We have some of our residents who are international. So it's a committee of people who are around a table discussing certain issues that are brought to us by our staff. For instance, medicine, as we know, is very complex today. It's never simple. Especially as people's illnesses advance, we know that some of the questions that are raised are, how much is enough? What are the goals of care? Are we giving the patient what is in their best interest? What is with what the doctors are recommending versus what a family may want? And sometimes that creates a tension between the medical team and the family. For instance, a doctor may say, Don, we think your loved one, we're doing all that we can, or we've done all that we can. And a family member say, but that's not enough. I want you to do everything. And as a wise intensivist, my colleague Marie often says in a family meeting, in those kinds of moments, she'll say, we've done everything. But for many families, it's not enough. Sometimes religious beliefs come into play that withdrawing care is not an option. And so we grapple with these issues. We do multicultural issues as well. We had an African Pentecostal family where in the American system we would go to a spouse as the first person responsible for the patient to be able to discuss these medical questions. And the African wife said, but you need to talk to my tribal leader, who was their pastor. And so we talked to the pastor, and it was a young man with cancer, and they believed that there would be a healing, and we pray that there would be. But sometimes the disease is in control and we're not. And so we get into these places, these gray areas where medicine, ethics, theology, belief, and family desire all kind of coalesce together around conversation to try to come to some understanding from an objective perspective. The ethics committee does not have any power. It has perspective, and it makes recommendations for the team and for the family.
And as a chaplain on the ethics committee, you represent what?
I represent as being a patient advocate, number one, as being someone who probably has worked with the family over the weeks or months that they have been a patient and have some understanding as to some of the issues that they're dealing with.
Are there times on the ethics committee and elsewhere where religion, spiritual support butt heads with medical science or
Well, it's not so much butt
technology?
heads, is it that to understand that difference. For instance, with an Orthodox patient, Orthodox Jewish patient, when they are intubated, that piece of equipment becomes a part of them. It's not to be taken out because it is helping to sustain life. And in the Jewish belief, life is everything. And so we try to navigate that with our families who have those particular issues. Excuse me.
There's some water if you wish.
That's great.
We done? It was interrupted there. You and I have worked on a committee together.
Yes.
My participation was short-lived, as it turned out, but to come more later. But you have a big project that has to do with spiritual support services and the chapel and technology.
Yes.
And I think you should take a moment now to explain what that is and how far along you are.
Well, we're very excited. We are launching a spiritual TV and media station in-house. For over 52 years, there's been a TV feed, which has been an internal TV station to the chapel. And it has basically been a view of the altar or the pulpit. And so I thought 5 years ago, what if we would take this incredible gift of having the access to patient rooms and then try to do something of broadcasting and bringing some programming to patients when they're in the hospital. So 5 years ago, I started to think about it, and I thought, well, what can we do? So I hired a consultant to come in, and he said to me, well, you know, inpatient is one area, but this whole evolving world of media and communication is with various, I'm coming to
Okay.
podcasts, thank you.
Okay.
And other means of communicating vis-a-vis the internet, and that we could talk to and communicate and be with patients like we're doing today. And so this whole world has opened up. And so God has granted volunteers who have incredible gifts, much like yourself, to help guide us over these last 5 years, that we are now in a place and a position to be able to begin broadcasting hopefully around early December, perhaps December the 6th. And so we're going to be drawing feeds from different religious groups. I'm going to be doing some feature presentations and topical spirituality, as we call it, on hope, on joy, on forgiveness, on coping, however it may be defined. But we look forward to extending our program so that folks can, and our patients and families from their home, from their devices, if they're inpatient, if they're having outpatient chemotherapy, wherever they are, they can access some spiritual support. And it doesn't matter their tradition, but we'll strive to respond to the needs of our patients as always.
Are you talking about constant new programming, 24 hours a day?
Well, we are going to be broadcasting and building a library for 12 hours and then repeating it at midnight for the first couple months until we can build programming that will allow us to go 24/7 eventually over time.
I have to admit, I was a patient in the emergency room a little while ago, and at 3 a.m. I had nothing else to do, so I turned on the TV and I flipped around or whatever, and saw, at that time, the camera was focused on the pulpit or whatever. And I thought, you know, it's nice that they have this camera in the chapel, but it's not really doing much. Right. Except, I have to admit, staring at it for a while, it kind of helped.
Okay.
It kind of helped calm me down.
Right.
So, but programming would have been nice as well.
Right. And so we're looking forward to that opportunity to bring that to our patients and families wherever they are. And that's really the exciting part of it, is that, as my consultant said, you know, you may have folks who are not congregationally based at all, and the reality is that they become part of this GBMC outreach, and that's what we want to do.
Very good. I wish you luck with that, having
Thank you.
spent many years on the other side. By the way, in case you wonder if we're getting through to anyone out there, Marjorie has commented, with the spirit of the soul and the medical field, both promotes healing.
There it is.
So
absolutely.
You made your point to at least one of our viewers.
Very good.
I'm never sure what to call people who are watching on Facebook at the moment. I guess they're viewers, right?
Sure. Why not?
I've exhausted the questions I have for you. I have a couple of things about you I want to talk about, but is there anything you wanted to bring up that I did not elicit?
Well, again, I can't emphasize enough, I think, the importance of knowing, letting others know that if you come to the hospital, we are there to support and be an avenue to the questions that you may have, to and in the many different ways. As I have the good fortune of clinically supervising graduate students who are studying to be chaplains. And the one thing I always say to my students is, remember this: many times when people walk through the door of the hospital on a particular day, they had no idea they'd be doing that earlier in the day. And so many times, because our lives are so unpredictable, that navigating crisis or navigating questions of life, many times it's very difficult to do alone, or when things are not going well with our health. Also, the nature of life and families today is that people are distant from each other. And many times, if their relationships are not in the best way, that then they are coming together around a crisis, that we are there to try to help navigate those pieces, whatever is unresolved, to try to bring some peace or solace, or at least some understanding to what they're going through.
Thus, spiritual support instead of just the chaplain.
Exactly.
And speaking of that, I know on your badge at work it says chaplain.
Right.
And I'd like to know a little bit about you, if I may. I've never heard somebody refer to you as Reverend Joe Hart.
Well, I'm actually an Episcopal priest.
Okay.
I'm a part of the Episcopal Diocese of Maryland, and my, if you will, ministry is primarily and focused toward GBMC from the Diocese of Maryland.
And your background, where'd you grow up?
Originally from Towson.
Oh, really?
Raised in Rogers Forge.
Okay.
Yeah, went to Towson High, and then went to Salisbury University, and then from there went on to St. Mary's Seminary and University, and did 2 degrees there in theology.
St. Mary's here?
Here in Baltimore.
Okay.
And then from there I went on to Catholic Theological Union in Chicago, in the University of Chicago, and then I did some studies at Harvard Divinity in mind-body medicine after that. Yeah.
Okay. So it sounded like a run of Catholicism there before.
Well, I was originally a Catholic priest for 10 years, and 2 years ago was received as an Episcopal priest. Yeah.
Which is a trend I have read as the, well, just go the other way, I guess. The trend goes the other way at the moment.
It goes both ways. And that, to me, it forms the fiber of faith. It weaves the tapestry of what I believe God has for all of us.
Okay. And have you ever had a church?
Yes, I served in 4 churches in Baltimore when I was a Catholic priest.
Okay.
Yeah. So throughout Baltimore, I was at St. Francis of Assisi, Hartford, and Chesterfield. From there, I went to St. Rita's in Dundalk. From there, I went to St. Elizabeth's in East Baltimore at Lakewood and Baltimore Street. And from there, I went to Immaculate Heart of Mary at Loch Raven and Taylor, and then on to GBMC in 1994, where I've been. Yeah.
So on their computers or their phones right now may be a lot of your old parishioners.
There you go. Hi, everybody.
Seeing you again.
Love you guys.
In a new light. Old friends looking at you in a new light.
There you go. Wonderful.
Well, I got somebody else's here. Anna Maria says, great job. Thank you for all you do to support our patients, families, and employees. I think we both know who that is. And Teresa says, hi, Don. Great seeing you. Good. You look great. Thank you. Some old friends of mine seeing me in a different light as well.
Wonderful.
Thank you very much. It's been a fascinating half hour.
And, thank you so much, Don.
I consider you
a pleasure.
A new friend.
Likewise.
And we've known each other, what, a year and a half now.
Something like that.
And we get to do something special here.
Absolutely.
The Baltimore Speaker Series is coming up again, of course, and GBMC is one of the sponsors. Next up in that speaker series is John Meacham, who's a Pulitzer Prize-winning presidential historian. And I think you get to do that.
Oh, my goodness.
People don't trust me.
Oh, okay. I'll try to be as anonymous as possible. There we are.
This is where the man of God comes in. You see, they trust you. They're not so sure about me. And it is Maria. Okay? That means something to our producer.
Oh, good.
And something else you're here to have me announce, and that is that the next time I will appear on GBMC Facebook Live will be with Mary Beth Marsden. Oh, wow. We're going to do our first program, or whatever this is called, together. And that comes up on November the 8th. We'll be talking about all kinds of things having to do with diabetes. So I've been learning. And I've been learning so much just having these conversations with people other than yourself, which I've learned a great deal today. And that'll be November 8th from 1 to 2 in the afternoon. So if you're used to joining me at 2 o'clock, it's 1 to 2, me and Mary Beth Marsden, with 3 different GBMC experts that day. So Mary Beth and I were just talking. It's going to be fun for us to work together for the first time ever.
Awesome.
And number 2, we're going to have a live studio audience in here and 3 people up here talking. Got to figure out how that's exactly going to work. But it's all new here at GBMC Facebook Live. Thank you again.
Thank you, Don.
Thank you for spending time with us. I'm Don Scott. See you on November the 8th.